So I just turned on my camera, and that could be good, that could be bad. um, my name's Bill, and I work out of the Vice President for Research's office in Scholes Hall, and I'm director of the Responsible and Ethical Conduct of Research program. That's something we started a few years back in order to promote the responsible conduct of research, of course, but more importantly, to help in develop modules like this, and mostly reach out to graduate students and to principal investigators and other researchers um, to talk about things like publication ethics, mentoring, conflicts of interest, use of animals in research, use of humans in research. So we cover everything from the IRB to the IACUC to export control. But today's just about the publications and the ethics of publishing. And it's going to hopefully feedback with you in the sense that I want you to write me some questions or to talk and interact and respond as to some of what your experiences are. Because really this hour or this 50 minutes, whatever this turns out to be, is for you. And you should walk away going, oh, wow, I think I got some information about how I can solve that problem, or move ahead and publish a paper or something. A technical note, Felipe, there's a screen up here. Is that something I need to worry about? The Logitech webcam controller, just minimize it. Okay, never mind. I solved my own problem. Just to start, let's see if oh, never mind. Being technically spastic here. There we go. There it is. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to change slides. There we go. So what I want to do tonight is, again, go through a case study about authorship, talk about peer review and how peer review works. There's only a couple of slides, and we'll probably not have time for those at the end, about data storage and warehousing and sharing. But there's a couple of points that I want to make sure that you get across that you're aware of, particularly as graduate students, and if you have funding, it could be relevant to what you're doing. Any questions or any things at this point? Feel free to type in the little window box. I can read that, or speak into your microphone, or you can put together a little paper airplane and slide it through the window or something. Nope. All right. A couple of things that I guess I would call the good and the bad, and you can tell me what you think this is good or bad. And that, for instance, in research misconduct or in issues of plagiarism or falsification or fabrication of data, which are definitions of research misconduct, we find cases all the time that come up. This one's out of the Chronicle of Higher Education, just came up. What's the date? I can't read that quite. It's October 3rd, 2012, so it was just last month, something like that. This is a guy that faked nearly 200 medical studies over 2 decades. And the discussion here is, how was he able to avoid detection for so long? Well, one thing is he was self-funded in a number of ways, and he started his own journal, and he was an editor on the journal. So it might, maybe made it a little easier for him to get some publications through. But think about what the implications are, something of this magnitude as far as medical research is concerned. Can anybody type me a quick response about 200 medical studies that have been faked over 2 decades? What would be an implication of that? Let's go. Anybody? Oh, good. We got a couple typing. No checks and balances. That's a good one. In this case, the procedures that were performed on people, right? So science progresses and research in general, scholarly activities more generally, proceed by people doing honest work, publishing it, getting it out there in the general knowledge base, so that it can be built upon. So if you have 200 papers that are all fake and people are building on that, that whole structure will collapse because it's not true. And again, something of this magnitude is huge. So that's what's important about misconduct, but it's also important about publishing and the process of publishing, the nuts and bolts, as it were. And that's what we're going to talk about. Here's another issue. Is this good or bad? Oh, I keep hitting the page down. Hold on a sec. There we go. Now, I know you can all read that perfectly well, but let me tell you what it says. The publisher's gender gap is, and this is out of The Scientist, which is an online, and there's a hard copy version of this. This talks about female scholars. Women are gaining ground on publishing, but not as much as you think. What these guys did is, it says here, the percentage of women authors in academic publishing has risen to 33% since, well, I hope I can read that, 1663 or something like that. We'll just say it is. I can't quite read the text on here, but 1665. What do you think about that? So women are, I mean, I think half the world, like 50%, would be women. Is that right? Somebody help me with that. So, yeah, we have an even sex ratio in the species called humans, and so 30% isn't quite where it would be parity as far as equal opportunity to publish. But what these researchers did was they looked at this database between 1665 and 2010, and they did analysis of 2.5 or 2.7 million scientists and social scientists and humanities scholars, and looked at male and female roles in publications. And as you might imagine, it was pretty flat for many years, and then probably in the last 40 years or so, women started publishing a lot more. So what are some of the things that contribute to this, let's just say, inequity in publication ethics, if you will? What might contribute to that? Why don't women have the same, all right, I'll use one of the words, the same access to publications or to publishing, or they haven't anyway, for so many years, as men do? Couple typing here. Review process, okay. That's a good hint. And science was, and the reviewers, okay. So science has been, and maybe research has been also predominantly male dominated for centuries, decades, and it's really only since the 40s or so that women have become professional scientists, or, I mean, there's of course exceptions, but it's fairly common practice now for women to be involved in science, to be on faculties at universities, to be editors of journals and reviewers of articles. But there's still a long ways to go, and there's probably some good reasons for that. So that's why I put this in with the bad or the good. In bad, obviously, if you're faking papers and all that, that's obviously not a good practice. But I think this is good that there seems to be approaching a equal access to publications, because publications are knowledge, and knowledge is, oh, I heard somebody out there, power, right? So it's important for either genders or different ethnic groups or racial groups to also not have a dominance on knowledge and power. So it's very important that there is some equity, and there's continual progress towards that. So one homework assignment I want you to do, either, I mean, you're probably not going to do it the second, because I know you're intimately following every word I say, but I want you to go look at the journals where you might publish. This is An example from Nature Nanotechnology, for all you nanotech people out there. But almost all disciplines have a journal that is for their specialty, and there are guidelines and directions on how to submit and the ethics behind it. I have this is I shouldn't do this. This will drive Felipe crazy. But anyway, this is a graduate student's guide to determining authorship credit and authorship order from the APA Student Council from 2006. I don't know that I think I just found this, so I'm not sure it's listed on the list of PDFs. But different groups again have ways to find out what should be published and how it should be published and how to submit. Moreover, the second link I have here, I don't know if you can see me clicking on that right there. JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, has some very specific criteria that they want for people that are going to submit journals to the Journal of the American Medical Association. Those guidelines, I think, are attached as a PDF, and I have a very ugly paper copy here as well. That I'm trying. You know, I'm old. You know, but I'm trying my best to promise Felipe that I will get those away from paper as much as possible. But as it says here, do not use. This is those guidelines from the Journal of American Medical Association, and there's some very specific criteria for authorship in particular. And if you take a look at those at some point, you'll see that every author needs to have some responsibility for the content, for the data, the design, the conception of the paper, the drafting, the manuscript, the analysis, even the roles in funding and supplying space. There are important roles. One more thing about this before I move on to the next slide is that different societies and different professional groups have different criteria for authorship and for publications. And that's you need to do as an assignment, is also look through those journals that you're interested in and see what those criteria are even before you design a study, to know what's maybe expected on the other end of the pipeline for publishing a paper. So go and look and know it ahead of time. Oh, I'm sorry. There's the gentleman. That's beautiful. That's all you get. So let's go through some of these definitional slides kind of quickly. This one is about authorship, and simply an author is a person who originates or gives existence to anything and takes responsibility for what was created. The purpose, of course, is to share the scholarly or lab research, also to get or keep a job or get promoted in a job. Authorship and publications are the currency of what we do in academia, but also in general in research and other scholarly activities. It's how many pubs do you got? Sorry, it's not good English, but that's an often a question you could hear. Likewise, if you submit for grants or funding, they'll want to know, list your 5 most prominent publications. And, you know, especially for students, that list can be sometimes pretty darn short. So if you look at the second part of the slide, humanities and math and computer sciences, and then the next slide for medical, natural sciences, and social sciences, each of these larger areas do have particular guidelines that apply, and they're not all the same. So the APA designates authors, much like the medical sciences does, for authorship and how much of a contribution you made to the study. Computer sciences may just list authors alphabetically. Just, you know, sometimes they have 20 or 30 authors, and how do you list all those people? How do they all decide on who's going to be in what order? Natural sciences tends to have 1, 2, 3 authors. Some of the bigger collaborative type projects, they may have a lot more, but natural sciences tends to have fewer numbers of authors overall. So how do all these authors talk to each other, and how do they work out what their different roles are on a paper? That is something you have to ask yourself, and ask it early on in the process of putting together a paper. So again, anybody out there, including you, have questions, just either type them in the window, or slip them to me on a piece of paper, or just say it and raise your hand. Raise your hand. Oh, that's good. And we'll pop into that because I want to answer specific questions as much as possible. Okay, so let's go on. A couple other things: honorary memberships, ghost authorships. These are kind of weird things that are on their way out. I just actually found this little note today, November 2nd, and again, this is going to drive Felipe crazy, but the title of this is an opinion piece, is Ghost Writing is Fraudulent. Fraudulent, that's a big word. And if you look on the definition of ghost authorships, it's an individual that should be listed for having made a significant contribution, but is not listed. And if it obscures that the investigator is conducting research, that should be disclosed. And that's really not to be done. So if someone writes a paper and they put their name on it, you kind of always want to ask right away, why? Because if writing a paper and getting published is such an important factor in your career, you would want to get credit for it. Again, going out of style is honorary memberships or honorary authorships, such as you want to honor the head of your department or something, even though they made no contribution. That's not acceptable anymore, as well as anonymous or pseudonyms. There may be a case for anonymous or pseudonyms on stories or work that the author might be in danger if they were identified, but that's a very rare case. Okay, no hands up, no questions, moving along here, just cruising through this. One thing to remember if you're a co-author or you have co-authors on your paper is that they are as responsible for that paper as you are. You can actually write in the paper that Joe Blow only did the statistics and that's all that they're responsible for. But in general, that doesn't happen. You've got co-authors, and it's assumed that everybody that's listed as an author is responsible for the entire content of the paper. So it can be that you may be involved in some misconduct issue if you don't realize that one of your co-authors may have done something fraudulent. You hope that's not the case. Most of the time, that's not the case. Authorship, what order? That's sometimes is a toss-up, but the rule is to sit down with everybody early on. Again, even when you're doing the study, and say, okay, when we write this paper up, I really have most of the intellectual content, and I'm going to take this paper, I'm going to carry it. I'm going to make sure it goes all the way through the end. So I'm going to be first author, and everybody will say, okay, that sounds fine. Get that in writing, send an email, tuck it away somewhere, because oftentimes, there are bad feelings when it actually comes down to writing the manuscript, and another co-author is really involved in it. May get their feelings hurt. Other contributors, people that work on your study to help you, to technically help you, or have some logistics that are helpful, are generally put in acknowledgments, and that also should be discussed early on, because sometimes people that work in the lab or are assistants in some way say, well, I did as much as so and so did, and I should be an author, and they're not. And if you have very definite criteria, again, if you look at that JAMA listing for responsibilities of authors, you can see clearly that there are some criteria that you can use to select authors. I'm not going to talk too much here about plagiarism, but just remember, someone else wrote that. It's not yours, so don't do it. It's just not yours. And these days, every journal and every granting agency, excuse me, has plagiarism checkers that they use. So you submit a manuscript to a journal, you submit a grant to an agency, they're going to run it through a program and come up with a plagiarism score. Same with the figures. If you submit a manuscript or a grant with some figures on it, they have different areas have image software that will detect image manipulation. So don't do it. I mean, unless you clearly state, I took this from so and so, and you attribute it. That's called citations. Again, I'll skip through the. You can, if you're interested more about plagiarism and attributing things, you can read this on the slides that you can download. I do want to talk a minute about self-plagiarism. It's a relatively new idea because when you write a paper and you submit it, you don't own it any longer intellectually. You've assigned the copyright to the journal that's now publishing it. So if you take your brilliant introductory prose and you recycle them, you use them on the next paper, you are actually guilty of plagiarizing yourself. So if you wrote it the first time brilliantly, you can write something second time new and also equally brilliant, even more brilliant. Who knows? There's also some other kinds of publications that are generally not viewed favorably, and that is sending the same article off to two different journals at the same time. If you have an inclination to do that, make sure when you submit the papers to both those journals, you say, I'm submitting this paper to Journal A as well as to Journal B, and see what they tell you. They won't be happy. Another practice that happens is what is commonly called salami science. Salami science being splitting up a study into multiple publications, what they call the least publishable unit. Really, it becomes very obvious for the person that does this. It becomes very obvious to someone that's looking at that that someone's trying to pad their CV or build up their publication list for promotion or something like that. I mean, you when you're ready to publish something, you generally know it, and it's I mean, particularly if you're doing a master's thesis or a dissertation, usually you'll get one good, maybe two good publications out of a master's, and a dissertation. Most people assume you're going to get 3 papers out of a dissertation. Some people do a lot better. Some people maybe not so much, but those become discrete units or discrete chapters if you're doing a dissertation. And again, remember, if you do publish something, you want to be careful not to infringe on the copyright. Publish material for which the author does not hold their copyright if it's been published. So there's your homework assignment. Go look at journals. Okay, I'll move on. Peer review. Let me just run through. I'm going to take a slug of water here. Any questions or hands going up? So let me just run through. I should probably put a little flow chart or something. Explain a peer review process. Most people that have published a paper will know this. If you haven't, it's you get to the end of a study or your thesis or something, and it's time to publish a paper. So you're very careful. You go through the guidelines for authors and you follow those guidelines very carefully, double spaced everything, everything's original figures. You checked it with your own plagiarism checker and all that, ready to go. So you send it off, hit that big button to send, and you send it off to your favorite journal. It goes to an editor who then looks at it, says, oh, I think I'll send that to a sub-editor who specializes in whatever it is you're studying. And that sub-editor then will look at it and usually read it or skim through it and think, oh, okay, I'm going to send this to 2 reviewers. I'm going to send this to one reviewer who is specialized in this area, and then I'm going to send it to a second reviewer who knows a lot about science in general or knows a lot about engineering in general, whatever your area is. And so I'll get these 2 different views of this paper. So off it goes. The sub-editor has assigned it to 2 peer reviewers. Then the peer reviewers they have usually a form to fill out in a sense, but they also look at the paper and will make comments directly on the manuscript. Some will make comments, they'll do it in text form. They'll say, line 37, second paragraph, wrong word. I mean, some will be very picky. Some will say, the introduction has too much in here about methods. Move that paragraph that talks about methods into the methods section and reduce it for clarity. I mean, so they'll be very constructive usually in their comments. You will find those people that aren't constructive. They're maybe even belligerent, and that's not really part of the process. That's not a nice thing to do. You also, as a peer reviewer, you'll be told you get 2 weeks, you get a month to review this paper and then send it back. So you don't want to take 6 months sitting on a paper to review it before you send it back to the sub-editor. You send it back to the sub-editor when you're done. He gets all the reviews back. He or she then reads through it again, makes a decision. Oh, this is a good paper. I recommend it for publication, pending some minor modifications. So then it goes back to you as the author. Says, very good, Dr. Sally, good job. If you can get these modifications done and back to me in 3 weeks, then I'll accept it for publication. That's all great. And make sure you do that. And make sure you stay on your paper where it is in the review process, because if you let it sit too long, it'll get tossed out. And you don't want that, all your hard work tossed out. So that's the general process. Now, there's a couple of concerns about peer reviewing, and that's what this list is here. Peer review and ethical concerns, unbiased and professional review of a grant is something you want, because what will happen sometimes is you'll get someone that has some biases. Can anybody think of any biases or any problems maybe with the peer review process? Or maybe anything? You can type your answer or your question. Hello? Hello? All right, well, I'll just go to the next slide, and that is, all right, Carlos, attaboy. Oh, he gave up. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, here's some of the potential problems, and as you do have bias. There's conflict of interest, lack of expertise. You may not find errors. There's a gender or racial bias. Okay. Carlos wrote, I was going to say that they make biases. Oh, yeah, different. Right. Okay. So someone may not agree with what your overall thesis is, or they may not agree where your interpretation. And that actually is the kind of, it's not really necessarily a bias maybe, but it's a scientific opinion, because when you do come up to write your discussion, you're looking at your results in the context of your hypothesis, or why you did the study, or why you're doing the work, and usually in the discussion you say what its general meaning is, what its meaning is for science, or for knowledge, or art, or something like that. That interpretation could have a cultural bias as well. So you may find a reviewer that doesn't agree with your interpretation. Actually, that is okay. That's sort of part of the process. The kind of bias or conflicts that we're talking about here is if you don't like somebody, or you're both working on the same project and you don't want that paper published because that'll take away from you getting published. So there's a number of things. Conflict of interest, or conflict of conscience, or conflict of time even can happen in review process. So those are all some things to worry about. Hopefully that doesn't happen. It does. But one thing, if you do recognize as a reviewer that you have some sort of conflict, you want to recuse yourself, or write back to the editor and say, I really don't feel good about this. This study, they're talking about, I'm really anti-abortion, and I don't agree with, this researcher using tissues from fetal tissue to study development of some cellular line or something like that. and I don't think I could give this study a good review, so I'm going to send it back. That's perfectly fine. And you can state your conscience and you can give it back to the editor. The editor will find another reviewer. You don't have to do it. Another problem, though, and I think happens more than people either admit or know, is that confidentiality. So papers are out there being read, and folks will take either methods or things in these papers and apply them to their own work without either contacting the author and asking if that's okay, or attributing it, just taking it without permission. That's not good. That's not okay. There are there's some things about the review process that have occurred in the last couple of years, maybe decade, I guess, that may help a lot of this. And when I was describing the review process, the two peer reviewers I described are usually anonymous, and the author is usually known. So right there, you know, if you're an anonymous reviewer, you can be as belligerent as you want, and the author won't know who was saying that. Of course, you don't want to be belligerent. On the flip side, the reviewer might know the author and say, "Oh, you know, that's old so-and-so, and he's always writes great papers, so I'm not even going to really look at it. I'll let it sit on my desk for a week so someone thinks I did, and then I'll send it back to the reviewers. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. That's great." Well, that's not a good review either. So there's been a move to make the authors anonymous as well as the reviewers anonymous. So they're anonymous kind of reviews, and that's got some really good things. There's some difficulties involved in that. You have to take out any clues to your identity out of the paper. So that may remove your own publications that are relevant in the literature side. That may remove, you know, where the location of the study site. I mean, it could remove a number of things that are relevant. And when you're reviewing the paper, going, hey, you know, this paper's incomplete. It's missing some important parts. But I think that's a minor setback. The third way of reviewing is where everybody knows everybody. So the reviewers are known and the authors are known. And that's got some good things, except people kind of hold back their comments because they I don't know, they don't want to be known that well, I guess. I'm going to look at it. We're going to look at a case study real quick, and this I'll go ahead and read it. It's, if you have downloaded anything, it's the one that's labeled banks, and I think it's part of the same PDF file as this. Hey, there it is. Wow, good job, Felipe. Wow, that guy is a magician. There it is. So it's the second page of this PDF. Man, that's horrible. You know, I got to really work on this. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's not banks. It's the first one. Excuse me. My bad. Go back up to Leonard. That's the guy, Leonard. Annotated case study 2. What is responsible peer review? That's the one. I'm just going to read through it real quick, and then ask a couple questions here on the other side. Okay? You ready? Everybody smiling? Where's your smiley face? I don't see any smiley faces. I know you can do it. Wait, where is it here? Felipe, where's the smiley faces? There they are. Oh, the laughter. Oh, you can do the little laughter ones. See the smiley face? There's one. Just want to make sure you're all awake still. Stop playing World of Warcraft or Words with Friends. We'll just go on here. Okay, let me read through this. Dr. John Leonard is one of the very few molecular biologists working in a particular field. Dr. Leonard receives a paper to review about a protein called survivin, which he and a graduate student in his laboratory are researching. The article is submitted by Dr. Mark Morris to Protein Interactions, a medium impact journal, and the editor has asked Dr. Leonard and 2 other experts in the field to review the paper. The article suggests a new interaction between survivin and the protein GFX and provides evidence for the fact that both proteins are necessary for the full survival promoting function of the survivin in the cell. The article also describes, though that if there's too much survivin inside the cells, they die. But the paper is fraught with problems. Poor controls, inconsistent data and figures, alternative explanations are not considered, and claims are overstated. Dr. Leonard gives the paper to his graduate student, Melissa Zane, who gives it a detailed critique and recommends significant revisions. Ms. Zane has never reviewed a paper before, and Dr. Leonard thinks that by doing so, it would be a good educational experience for him. Ms. Zane notes the finding about too much survivin being toxic to cells, a problem she has been working with the protein and discusses it with Dr. Leonard. Both agree that they should lower the dosage of survivin in her experiments. The cells actually survive for a week, longer than her experience before, and then they die. Leonard submits Zane's and his own comments about the research to the editor, suggesting that the paper be accepted only after a few more experiments are performed to validate some of the conclusions. One of the other reviewers has comments similar to Dr. Leonard's, and the editor asks Dr. Morris, the author, to make the revisions before he'll accept the paper. Sounds pretty standard so far to what I described on how peer review goes. But in the next few weeks, the interaction between GFX and survivin that is discussed in the paper remains in Dr. Leonard's mind. GFX was not a line of inquiry that Leonard and Ms. Zane were following in their research. They were focusing on other stimulatory proteins, but unsuccessfully. Dr. Leonard suggests to Ms. Zane that she add the compound to the cell structure system that stimulates the cell to produce its own GFX, a method that is somewhat different from what was in the paper by Morris that is under review. The enhancement works. The cells survive for a month. And Zane and Leonard draft a paper based on the results, which includes appropriate controls to Science, a very prestigious journal. And that accepts the paper. Several months later, Protein Interactions, that kind of lousy journal, publishes a revised paper from the lab of Dr. Morris. But after Dr. Morris sees the article in Science, he suspects, dun 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 dun, that Dr. Leonard, who was an anonymous peer reviewer on the paper, might have taken some of the ideas from the Science article for his paper under review. Morris knows that Leonard hadn't been working on GFX because it's hard to purify, and deduces that he used material in the unpublished manuscript to stimulate GFX activity. Okay, so that's the study, that's the Leonard case. What do you think are the main issues here? Go ahead and type it in the little box. And everybody, George and Karina and S. Robinson, I don't know who S is, Talal, Carlos, well, no, Carlos, you've been typing like crazy. So, theft of an idea, good idea. What else? Ooh. Oh, the question cut out on my end. Oh, the question was, what do you think are the major issues here in this case study? And Felipe, would you flip back to the slides, please? So theft of an idea, no citation. George is writing some, having the grad student review the paper. Oh, good. The grad student reviewing the paper, that's an issue, sure. Let's see what I think I had some questions here. Oh yeah, there they are. Wow, look at all those questions. So there's 6 questions that might come up about this, and I think you guys hit on some of them. So the questions are, and I'm going to keep my slides out so I can remember what the darn questions are, because we'll flip away from them here in a second. Is what types of conflict of interest might arise? Is it, number 2, is it ever appropriate for a peer reviewer to give a paper to a graduate student to review? Is it appropriate for a peer reviewer to use ideas from an article under review to stop unfruitful research in a reviewer's laboratory? Is it ever appropriate for a reviewer to use ideas from a paper under review, even if the method to achieve the result is different from that used in the paper under review? That's kind of related, number 3. 5 is, what are some of the challenges in the current peer review process? And 6, what recourse is there for Dr. Morris if he suspects that his ideas were plagiarized? Salud. So let's take a look at some of the answers to these issues. I'll give the first one. You can answer the second one. So the first one was what types of conflict of interest may arise, and here's some of the conflicts. Is a reviewer may benefit from the findings in a paper or grant application, may be too close to the author or applicant, may not like the author or applicant, may disagree with the methods or the science of the author. That was sort of what somebody said earlier about a different paradigm or different philosophy. May be in very clear or direct competition with the author or applicant, may have religious or philosophical views that are in conflict. But I think, in some of those cases, if you philosophically don't agree on some of that, I think you can state that in the review, and that's not necessarily going to shoot down the review. I mean, if you're transparent on the idea. So those are some ideas of what conflicts are. The second question is, ever appropriate to give a paper to a graduate student? How do you learn?
Can't you not release it without permission at all? That's the way I understood it.
You can't. I'm answering a oral question here. Can you not do what without permission? Say it again.
Wouldn't you need permission to release the paper at all? Somebody else to read?
Right. So you need permission, right? So if you wanted someone else to review it, and say you did want your graduate student to read it, first you'd write back to the editor and say, thank you for submitting this paper to me to review. I'll do it, but I'm also wanted my student to look it over. I was going to use it as a learning experience. Most times, depending on the area of study, but most times the editor will say, sure, go ahead. Just remember it's confidential, but I'll make note that it's assigned to your student. And as long as it's used as a learning tool, that's probably appropriate. But the main thing here is getting permission and from the editor of the journal. Let's see what let's see what this says. Slide thing here. Ouch, there it goes. Whoa, come on. Where'd it go? There's no answer. I knew it. Come on. Whoa, it disappeared. Well, there's number 3. Well, that's a technical glitch. Okay. Well, if that in that big white space there that's not visible on the screen, it says peer review should be a confidential process in which the reviewer considers the material in the paper or grant application to be privileged. If a reviewer would like to ask assistance of other parties in the review, he or she should get that approval from the editor. Okay, so that's in keeping with what we were just saying. The third question was, is it appropriate for a peer review to use ideas from an article to stop unfruitful research? Well, yes, it is, but not to then change your method and then continue and then publish. I mean, that whole process after the survivin was helped the cells live, that's what's an issue. So, but it says here on A3 is that, at least according to this Society of Neuroscience, if information obtained during the review of a manuscript indicates that some of the reviewer's own research is unlikely to be successful, it would be ethical for the reviewer to discontinue the research. It's recommended that the reviewer then tell the author about his activities. So again, communicating what your actions were is part of this process. Okay, let's just throw the last 3 up here. Ooh, that one stuck. Good. So the last 3 last 3 questions had to do about peer review and anonymous peer reviews. So let's focus on A5, that red square. Some say that anonymous peer reviewers can abuse their position by holding up review processes to finish their own work, by appropriating information, or by giving bad reviews to disliked colleagues. Detectable, the reviewer was known. A new approach, again, is this anonymous method. And then last, if the author, this is A6, feels that someone's appropriated your information, the author can seek legal representation or contact the institution where the peer reviewer works. The institution then will deal with it as an alleged misconduct, and that will go up the chain, if you will, in the administration. If you have evidence that and you can document that your ideas were stolen, and there could be a misconduct investigation. So that's an important part of this. Okay. Just to summarize this is from this Nature Nanotechnology. But to talk about peer review, this is the process we just went through. It's a corresponding author is notified by email when the editor decides to send the paper for review. Authors may suggest referees. Now, this is something that's really important. When you submit a paper to be reviewed, to get published in a journal, you can say, hey, I'd really like for Janet Smith and Frank Jones and whatever to be reviewers, because I know they know this work, and they don't know me, but they know this work really well, and they would be very good reviewers. You can also say, do not have Bob, I don't know, I can write out a name here. Do not have this person, that person, or another person review it, because one, that person doesn't like me. Second, that person was my advisor at another school, and so they would be biased. And I'm married to this other person, so don't send it to them. Whatever. So you can actually make those recommendations when you submit a paper. So that's something that is, and most journals have a policy like this. Okay. I'm going to skip through the data ownership and management, and although I'm going to come out the other end, and let's see, because there's another case study that we're not going to go through, but you can read it if you can read it actually on that PDF, about who owns research data and how could the problem of research notebooks be avoided. The issue here is that, especially as graduate students, you may think everything you do is yours, and the same with faculty. But in reality, if you have funded research, the PI, the principal investigator, the faculty member usually is the holder of the information for the university, and it's safeguarded by the PI. So let's say the National Science Foundation. Oh, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Good. Let's say the National Science Foundation gave you a 4-year grant. Went through the university. You generate all these papers. You collected all this great data. The institution actually owns those data, and the institution actually owns your lab notebooks. The institution owns the products of that research. But for the most part, the PI maintains them and keeps them in good keeping. And that's why these last couple of slides talk about data management and warehousing. It's important to be able to keep those data around for future use, at least for some period of time. Where problems happen is that a graduate student gets done, you get a job or a postdoc, and they plan on continuing the work that they've been doing in their new institution. And they pack up all the lab notebooks and haul them off. Well, in reality, in some cases, you may have even, well, probably not broken the law, but you need to get written permission to take your own lab books. I know, that seems funny, but that's what happened. So George wrote, is having the grad student review the paper an issue? Oh yeah, no, we already got that. Uh-oh, big question. Hold on. I got to scroll down so I can read it. George, you have your hand up. Do you want to speak, George? Oh, about impact factors. Oh, right. Right. Most journals have a rating and their quote impact factor. Overall, I would say to get through the publication process successfully, and don't worry about how highbrow or medium brow, I guess, a journal may be, because your first paper, unless you really have some cutting edge work, and a lot of students do. You probably won't get it in science or nature the first time. You might. I mean, I'm not denying that at all. It's just that if you're um, well, if you're a grad student like I was, no, you'll work really hard and you'll get a really solid study done, and it's important for it to get published in the right journal. It may not be as important to think about the impact of the journal right off the bat. Now, your advisor, your mentor, your faculty advisor, of course, has precedence here. I mean, whatever they tell you to do, for sure. But I mean, I think it's important to get through the process successfully and happily. I know a number of people that have had a horrible first experience, and they'll go, I'm never going to publish a paper again. I'm going to go in a different field. I'm going to go work for the city or something and do something else. That you don't want to do. You want to have a good, positive experience the first time through, as best you can, and get your work out as best you can. And frankly, if you are getting to that point of publishing, another issue is presenting at annual meetings or at conferences. There's some finesse to that as well, and some people have actually had their work stolen in that way. They're almost done, they go to a meeting, they present their study, and someone hears it and then sort of beats them to the punch on publishing it. That's no fun. But it is competitive out there, and you will have negative experiences. But just to speak to your question, I would say the very first one you want to have a positive experience if you can, and it's a lot of work, especially the first time, because you don't know the process, and it takes a while to learn that. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
We're almost out of time, and we need to move on to the evaluations.
Are you kidding me? We're having fun here. Oh, look,
Sorry.
he just denied me of that. Wow. I've been denied. Okay, let me just say one more thing. There is a last slide in here. Actually, there's two last slides, but I'll just point to the last slide. Just let me. Are we going back? Oh, thank you. This is a good summary slide here. It's NSF's data sharing, and I told you I was going to skip these anyway. This NSF expects significant findings from research. So this is what we've been talking about this hour, is that significant findings from research and activities, and supports to be promptly submitted for publication. Authorship needs to reflect the contributions of those involved. It expects investigators to share with others at no more than incremental cost and within a reasonable time data, samples, physical collections, and other supporting materials. It also encourages awardees to share software and inventions to make them useful and usable. So expectations may be allowed to safeguard the rights of individuals, subjects to the validity of results and or integrity. That's what NSF, the National Science Foundation, recommends. And this last thing is just an article about intellectual property. This woman was thrown in jail, was arrested for stealing her own lab notebooks out of her the place where she worked formerly. She broke in, right? But that's because she didn't have an agreement to use those data. So you can go look this up out of Science. I want to thank you very much, and as Felipe says, go ahead and get to the evaluation. This is the last one of the semester, Yahoo, and Adobe Connect's a great tool.
Okay, guys, I opened the evaluation on your browser, so you can look for it now there, and it's also here in the chat window. Go ahead, Carlos. Okay, I wanted to thank again everyone for joining us. Please complete the evaluation before we go so we can improve our services on your behalf. Thanks for joining us. Have a nice break, and I hope to see you again for our online or face-to-face workshops in the spring. Thank you.